Welcome to Walk with Frank. We're beginning a new Quarantine with Frank series, bringing you interviews, personal interviews with our healthcare providers, our educators, people on the front lines of what's going on in America. We hope to enlighten you. We hope to continue with moving forward and the Walk with Frank concept of always moving forward and looking ahead. We are all veterans now. We're all at war as a country. And for the first time, America can feel what it's like for a country to mobilize towards a common enemy. Today's podcast will be a personal interview with Keith Doc Dawson, an ICU worker, a combat veteran from Iraq, a PTSD survivor, a recovering alcoholic, and at one time a homeless veteran. Doc will take us inside the ins and outs, the workings of the ICU units, and the lives of the men and women fighting on our front lines. Along with Doc, we'll have commentary by our producer, Matt Mayers from Mayers Films. This personal interview can shed light on some of the thoughts and issues that we all share as a society together. Feel free to write us, email us, text us, and I will answer all questions. So welcome, Doc.
How you doing, Frank?
Hello, buddy. How are you? How are you holding up?
As well as we can do, you know.
Well, of course, my first question and everybody's question and all our followers, people that are going to view this, that what's on our minds is the ins and outs and what it's like in the ICU unit. You know, what's it like in a trauma center now? Basically, you know, you're there. Your shifts, I assume, are just endless, and caring for these people, knowing, I know we talked that you were in the post-morgue area, you know, working with people that were dying. So give us a little idea of what your life is like on a daily basis.
Well, I'm in a position right now. I go to nursing school full-time, which is online, but I also work at Unity, what they call per diem, but it's not per diem anymore. It's on-call basis, but I can work anywhere from a 4 to an 8 to a 12-hour shift, depending upon what they need. Yeah, I work in the ICU. I work under the nurses as a patient care tech. So basically, nurse help. With my background in paramedicine, I'm doing a lot of patient care. The patients we get, we have a 20-bed ICU. And at the beginning of all this, you know, some 3 weeks ago, 4 weeks ago, we were ramping up for it. And there's a couple of individuals that I work with. One actually I worked with in Iraq. I found that out. He's a nurse now. He's a nurse practitioner, and they said, "Oh, you guys have, you know, basically gone through something like this with combat, you know, mass casualty, that type of thing." And we're like, "Yeah, we've done this." So we helped out ramp up, and then there was a lull. We're waiting and waiting and waiting. Now we're still getting the non-COVID positive or non-COVID rule outs, but the sick people, ICUs, intubations. Really bad illnesses. Well, now our ICU is almost entirely full of rule out COVID or COVID positive. Monroe County, which is the county that is the hospital's location, is it's absolutely, you know, chaos. It's very, very busy with patients. As far as shifts go, I go in usually afternoons and overnights. During the day, I do nursing school online, and that's about my existence right now. I live still in the veterans housing, and I keep to myself because everybody here is isolated. As far as work goes, get on shift, we get checked out, make sure we're okay to work, temperature-wise, feeling okay-wise. They kind of discount the mental health part right now. They're actually getting back into that. They're saying, okay, you guys are seeing some really bad stuff, so you're doing all right. And, you know, typical medic, we say, oh yeah, we got this. We see it, we usually lose one patient every 1 or 2, maybe 3 days. And we have what they call comfort care at the ICU, where if the family knows that the patient's gonna be intubated or not do well, then they pull all care and they just let them pass. That's tough for me because I'm used to trying to save lives, and it's not happening. Worst case is the fact that nobody can come in to see their family members pass because the isolation. We are allowed occasionally, under circumstances, if the patient's passing, one family member comes in fully garbed the same way we are and says their goodbye, and we do a rotation on that. So it's rough, but it's you got to deal with it.
It's interesting you said that, because I posted something on my website and Facebook account for a Walk with Frank, that a combat veteran that I fought with in Vietnam in the 199th, and he was shot 13 times, and he received a silver distinguished medal, service medal, and he was the first patient to die of coronavirus in Brennan County, Michigan, and he died the same way. And there is an American hero who died alone and will be buried alone, without his loved ones around him, after serving his country and being honored as a recipient of the Distinguished Cross. So it's gotta be so hard. I mean, that's post-trauma. It's gotta be so hard to see these people dying alone. It's gotta take its toll. On going back to what you just said, now there's new guidelines. So for nurses and doctors, they have to check in and check out. You have to take your temperature. Tell me a little bit about that.
So when this first started, there was so much unknown. Okay, and this I've been watching the news, just keeping up to date on the county mostly. New York City, I'm kind of not really paying attention to, although it's important, but we need to stay close to home. So at the beginning, it was an unknown, so we didn't really know. At Richard's house, I started instituting taking temperatures. Now this is 3 weeks ago. Taking temperatures, because that's a guideline. Take them in the morning, take them at night. And we did that guideline. If your temperature got above a certain degree, 100.3 is the cutoff, starts showing signs, then you might have it. At the hospital, they started doing the same thing. We have to go online 2 hours prior to our shift from home or from an area outside the hospital. We do a questionnaire, and then that questionnaire goes to the charge nurse. And there's 3 questions. Do you have a temperature? Have you been around anybody that you know is COVID positive? Or do you have a cough? Do you feel, you don't feel up to par to come into work? And then once that goes through, then we're allowed to go to the hospital, get checked in, and they laser us again. They take a laser thermometer, put it to our forehead, and it checks our temperature instantly. Because there's been, in this recent week, there's been numerous nursing staff, doctors, nurses, PAs, respiratory therapists, all those have fallen ill to this without even knowing it. Because initially the PPE was like, okay, what do we wear for this? And, put surgical masks on. Now I wear a huge abundance of PPE. So I'm actually probably safer at the hospital around all these sick people than I am out in the community. So that's what's interesting.
Does it look like a hazmat suit?
So first it's a plastic gown, and these are disposable. And then underneath it is what they call it N95. 3M is what I wear at work, and then I wear this here around the house, duckbill, N95. And then on top of the N95 is another surgical mask, so that we can wear the N95 numerous times. And then on top of that, I wear my bifocal safety glasses so I can see, and so it doesn't get into my eyes. And then on top of that, I call it my jousting hood. It's actually a plastic hood that comes all the way down to cover my chest. Double gloves.
That with the clear mask?
Yep. I've posted on Facebook a couple times. I'll send you a really cool picture. My daughter and my son live in Florida, and they were very worried about it. So I'm like, I'm safe, as safe as we can be. Doesn't really matter how much PPE, as we call it, do we wear. You also have to have the smarts to, if something happens, like if a intubation tube breaks, comes apart, and it gets splashed, and you go immediately get washed up. But we wear this all the time. When we're in the patient's room, we wear it. When we're outside on the floor, we still wear the mask and the goggles, because this is an unknown. This is a, you know, this is called a war. Well, this is an unknown enemy. That's the way we equate it. It's an unknown enemy.
How often you go through that gear in a day? You know, how many times you change it through it, and how's your hospital doing on that stuff?
That's a good question, Matt. So we get there on shift and we have one mask that we wear all around the floor, and we wear that for the entire 4, 8, or 12-hour shift. And then the N95, we're allowed to wear it for one shift up to a 12-hour period, covered by the surgical mask. And then it goes into a recycling. It goes into a sterilization process down in the OR. Now, before this all happened, we were wearing a mask for one patient, and that's it. And then we dispose of it. But there's no supplies. The gowns are tear off after patient contact. The gloves, that's why we double glove. We go through, oh my gosh, I can't even imagine how many gloves and gowns we go through. The helmets, we have to wash them down with bleach. All my personal stuff, I wear scrubs at work. I leave them at work. I have them laundered at work because soap and water, hot water does work on it. I don't take anything home to me because it's just unsafe, you know. But the PPE is a huge issue, and a lot of people, like, I'm making survival bracelets for a bunch of people that I know. I put it out on my Facebook. They're like this, pretty cool. And any proceeds I get to that goes right into a fund, you know, for protective stuff, because this is not done. This is not even close. You know, the apex is not there, as they say it. So it's a war, you know.
So going back to the apex now, we should explain to everyone watching that you're in Rochester, New York, and
Yes.
it seems like New York was the epicenter, and now we're spreading out across the country for various reasons. New Orleans was the Mardi Gras. Detroit now has their issues going on. Chicago now is batting down the hatches. So are you taking, are the health officials there taking their lead from what's happening in here in New York and preparing for the worst? I mean, are you gearing up for a worst case scenario that you're in right now?
Yeah, New York was the epicenter. New York City, downstate as they call it. I'm from New Hampshire originally, so then you come upstate, and what we're doing is we're doing in the Army, they call it AAR. We're doing all of the information that we're getting from New York and taking it into my county, and they're saying, okay, what did they do good and what did they do that needs improvement, and learning from it. Unfortunately, we have to do that way. I wish we were more prepared at Unity. It's a great hospital, but I don't think they were prepared for this. But we're all pulling together, and you know, like the Army says, rigidly flexible. That's the way it works. You come to work. My nurse manager does a briefing with all the nurses and all the patient care techs. Normally, there's nurses on 10 people on shift, and there's just me. Sometimes we get a float PCT, but it's a busy schedule. We very seldom, we get fed very well. I will say that we get fed very well. Lots of donations, but to take a break and eat, take a break and go to the bathroom, it's busy, and that's with cardiac arrest, respiratory arrest. That's why I work in the ICU, because it's sick people. It's not just a regular, you know, ward. But we're taking the guidelines from New York. They seem to think that they're at they're getting ready to come up over the hill of this, the apex. Our county commissioner, our medical person here, he seems to think that we are at what they call the calm before the storm, I guess. That's what his guideline was. So he says, don't relax it. We need to be vigilant, and that's what we're doing. We're taking guidance.
You're not in administration, but do you have any idea, are the hospitals working together in your city? Are they, you know, if someone needs something from another hospital, can they call up and get help or get personnel, let's say? Or if they're short-staffed, is that an option?
Oh, there's always short staff. Like I said, I work by myself. Usually there's 2 PCTs on, and right now there's just me, and there's occasionally a float. I know nursing staff, they work at the minimums. Now it's the ICU, so you have 1 nurse per 2 patients, because these are intubated patients, these are sedated patients. It's not an ER where you've got 6 patients to 1 nurse. These are really sick people. So patient staffing, nursing staffing and doctor staffing. If there's a need, then we have Rochester Regional that is our mother group. Unity is a small hospital. Anything trauma goes out, anything cardiac goes out, but there's always a pool to take from. We are a very tight community, so we also have strong U of R. And if we need help, we get help from that. But we're very, very close family. We stick together. New York was saying that they were going to take ventilators from us if they need us. Well, upstate now we're seeing the brunt.
Okay. Now, so you and I are both PTSD survivors. You've gone through your own post-trauma. Of course, you know my story. I know your story, and we actually work together in education to talk about PTSD and inform people about PTSD. I've talked to several people. I've interviewed several therapists, and they're talking a lot about relapse. You're a recovering alcoholic, and you post-trauma. Seeing these people die, going back, I know my dreams and nightmares have come back in these recent events. And how are you handling personally, on a personal level, how are you handling your post-trauma and your sobriety?
Well, as far as how I'm handling it, so this whole situation came up, and it did bring back some remembrance of Iraq and my deployments. The people that pass at the ICU, they're just patients to me. I'm not going to say it doesn't bother me, but it's medicine. People die in the ICU every day, and so I handle it that way. I'm coming up on 2 years sober. I don't think I've ever been this sober this long, and it feels really good. And I attribute that to what's going on right now. To be honest with you, the chaos and the organization that involves that chaos of taking that stability in it. That's what keeps me sober. Of course, I've got my program through the VA and that type of thing, and I also look back at where I was 2 years ago and say I don't want to be that person anymore. Whether it be clean and sober, whatever. I go to work and make sure I make a difference. I go to school, far be it online, whatever, and make sure that that goal I have is set and still conquerable. I do have a couple guys here in the apartment complex that I'm at that share my same history, and we stick together. We talk about some things. There's a lot of relapse going on around me, and I see that the guys that are doing that don't have a good solid program. You have to have a good solid program, whether it be spirituality or AA, whatever. Work, that's what I use. I use work and school and good family and friendship. And I don't think if I didn't have that, I think I'd go out and use, because I actually talked to some of the nurses after a bad call, bad patient outcome. And they're like, hey, let's go out for a drink. And I'm like, I can go out with you. I don't drink. And they go, oh, okay. Well, then you can just go out for, friendship. Well, of course, now we don't do that anymore because of the social distancing. But I'm not saying it's easy. It's not saying it's easy. My nightmares came back, and the medicine that they have me on isn't working as well as it was. But stress level's up there. But I guess as a medic, I kind of thrive on the adrenaline rush and stress. But
I feel the same way. I feel the same way, and I hated, and I've taught for many years about learning to embrace your trauma, learning to use it, and it sounds like that's what you're doing. You're embracing what you're doing, knowing what to expect, knowing what your triggers are, knowing that what you're doing is positive in a positive way, and so those that are listening out there and those that are struggling, as far as I'm concerned, it's learning more about yourself, learning to embrace your trauma. You want to add to that? You want to talk a minute?
Well, I think what I do is I look at what's going on in the hospital, and there's a couple of different people I've talked to about circumstances. How do you deal with death? How do you deal with this? I'm like, well, same way I did in Iraq. Actually, it was worse in Iraq because I got to know some of the people that were in the back of my helicopter. Here, it's like I don't really know these people. They come in and they're already intubated, they're sick, and they're already dying. So it's just making sure that they're comfortable and making sure that if they do have a good outcome. I had a recent situation. I'm not going to use any names here at the housing. Right at the beginning of this, I got off a shift, and I was getting ready. It's like 8 o'clock in the morning, 12-hour shift, and sat down, and I'm kind of zoning out on the couch, relaxing, and I got a knock on my door, and they're like, "Doc, doc, doc, we got somebody that's needs you," and I think he might have killed himself, and so I ran over next door, and sure enough, this individual tried to commit suicide, and it just reminded me of one of the scenes I've seen in Iraq. Lots of blood, but I just took a deep breath, focused on the task at hand, and went through it. I think as combat medics, we're trained to do that. I think that as veterans, we're also trained to take care of one another. And I tried to do that at work by saying, hey, we're all going to have PTSD after this. We're seeing bad things. Now you just have to learn how to deal with it, whether it's good or bad. So try to pass that on to people.
Yes, what I've been doing lately is trying to prepare the public. I call it the PTSD pandemic because it's now reached, whatever, 180 countries in the world. It's World War III, so to speak. And I'm trying to prepare people with my education programs and set up, a little preemptive education to get it out there. And I see a mental health crisis in our future. What's you want to add to that?
Yeah, with the guys that live here that aren't able, as soon as this happened, the guidelines for the housing said you're not going anywhere unless you're essential. And I'm the only essential worker here. I'm the only one that works in a hospital or works in a type of situation I need to go to work every day. There are 5 guys that were sent outside of this housing and put into another housing because they have to work as well. They have bills to pay. They have families to, take care of, but they're still under the guidelines of the program. So what I did was took a look just in the past week, talked to my director and said, hey, now let's look at the next level. We know we're in the chaos right now, but this is going to start opening up old history, old wounds of some of the guys here. They're not seeing their families. Easter's coming up, okay? I'm not a big Easter person, so I'm going to work. But a lot of these guys want to see their families. How are they dealing with that? They're all upset because they're taking away their freedoms. But they're not out there in the community seeing this sickness, seeing that people are still walking around without masks on, not within the parameters. So you're absolutely correct. When you said that, I was like, oh yeah, you're right. This is going to be a mental health issue because we got veterans that this is going to bring back memories of things they've seen. So I think that's a great idea. We have to look beyond the chaos right now and just keep on moving and see where this goes. And then ultimately have a big AAR and say, what did we do right? What did we not do right? Let's try to fix this for next time. Hopefully there isn't a next time, but there is. There'll always be a next time.
That's the point that I try to make. Right now, we're in the moment, so to speak. And
Correct.
being in combat, we're in the moment. I know it. You know it. In the moment, we're not. You can't possibly think about the outcome. You can't possibly dwell on the moment. Let's call it. When you're in that combat, you're in that firefight, you're in that helicopter, you're in the ICU unit, and so the idea of thinking about the future is almost people can't comprehend that because they're in the moment. They're watching the news 24/7. There's nothing good on the news talking about. It's horrific. So we're in the moment. You are in a unique situation, and this is one of the main reasons I wanted to have you on with me, is that you're sober. You're a recovering alcoholic. you suffer PTSD, you're a PTSD survivor. People don't understand exactly what you're broadcasting from, but you're in a veteran's home. And so you're surrounded by PTSD on a daily basis. You're surrounded by veterans, whether it be homeless veterans, veterans that are mandated by the court to be there. So you're in a unique situation. Give us an idea about lockdown to a person that's going through all these different aspects of trauma. Not just one level. You're dealing with multiple levels of trauma that I can't even fathom, as the outsider. And this is one of the main reasons that you and I struck up a chord, and you and I are doing this.
Well, let's see. That's one of the things I wrote down. So we got the word from the VOC, and they said, okay, we got this going on, and I got the word through my contacts, Unity, this is what's going on. So we meshed together, and staff decided, we don't know where our residents are going hourly to hourly, daily to daily, except for a little bit. We don't know what they're going to be in contact with. So everybody, unless you need to be gone by work or etc., lockdown. That means you're accountable. Now, everybody here is basically voluntary to be here. They can leave anytime they want. All right. Right now, we don't have any court mandated, thank God, for people. But so the first week was absolute. The staff came off site. They only had minimum staff. Everybody was not able to go anywhere except for the people that needed to go someplace. They started moving people out. It was very chaotic. The second week started getting a little more organized. We started doing the whole mask process at that point, because I'm like, hey, we got to wear masks. I wear them at work. Let's be safe. Err on the side of good judgment. We basically were treating everybody in here like they had it, to include me, because we didn't know. And then coming up on the next week, people start understanding, this is, it's going to get better, but it's and then they started getting a little bit, their freedoms were gone, even worse than before with curfews. Their freedoms were gone. So I want to see my kids. I want to see my whatever, my relatives. Well, you can't yet, because it's still getting bad. It's still as bad as it was. So you take away their freedoms and their mental health, and these guys aren't doing in-person mental health appointments. The VA shut down. Everything's telehealth. Not everybody's computer savvy. So there's even more stresses. We've had 3 people that have just said, I'm done. I don't need to be here. They left and they relapsed. You have to have a strong background. So everybody has to take accountability, I guess. That's the way I look at it. I could leave at any time. I don't want to, because this is a safe place for me. But there's not a lot of people in here. I'd say a good 10% of the people aren't happy with what the rules are. But what I try to impress is, this is not just in here. Out there in the community, it's the same thing. Social distancing, lockdown. If you like going to work, it takes me about 30 minutes on the bike to go to work. It's a ghost town out there. There's nobody out there. So they're not missing anything. And that's what they got to realize. But they have, I guess I call it their attitudes, They don't understand because they don't see it. And the news doesn't help. News doesn't help.
I've interviewed several people that several therapists have mentioned right here on this show that one of the things people can do best for themselves is to lessen their time on social media, lessen their time on watching TV, especially if they're in stress. That less of the bad stuff and find something to entertain yourself with might work. For those that don't know it, that are watching, I spent time living in this particular home where Doc is broadcasting from, and it's called Richard's House. And when I was there, I met and interviewed a lot of the men there, and I know a lot of their stories. I know some at the time were court mandated to do something about themselves, or go back to prison. Mm-hmm. I felt the energy there, personally, that a lot of them were on the edge to begin with. A lot of them were hanging on by a thread to begin with, and we won't mention any names. And some of them have left that you and I know. And so it's got to be hard. It's got to be hard for them to have what little freedom they have to be taken away, and they can't escape their PTSD because the guy in the next room has PTSD. The guy at dinner sitting across from them is suffering. The guy, at KP, or, whoever, the chore duty, these guys all are in the same boat. So they can't escape it. I mean, that's just a time bomb waiting to happen, isn't it? I mean, relapse has got to be on the forefront of everything going on at that home there. Is that correct?
Oh yeah, most definitely. That's why we try to individually talk with people. We have certain, group of guys. Me and another guy next door are really tight, and then guy downstairs are really tight. And we try to share experiences, share our feelings, that type of thing. Get spiritual. Try to pass that on to the guys next door. Some of them just don't want to hear it. I found with this lockdown, immediately within the first week, that all the area, the community stuff that I do, like comp here and the golf, that's not going to happen this spring. The rowing is not going to happen this spring because we're in lockdown. But you know what? Through Facebook, I do buddy checks. Okay, I'm very, very, I'm very, very involved in the community. Started doing buddy checks. Okay, MCC, Monroe Community College, doing buddy checks to all my veteran buddies. You gotta still reach out. Some of the guys here are not computer savvy, and they don't want to be. So that's, they'll deal with their own thing in their own way. But there are a lot of guys that we reach out to because it's a brother. You got to do that. You got to keep on occupying yourself. You can easily sleep all day, be up all night. Everybody says, "Oh, great! This is a great time to binge and watch Netflix for 24 hours." Well, that's great for the first couple of days in an emergency, but then you have to start thinking about what comes next. Lots and lots of Zoom programs out there. VOC has, cooking online and yoga. I just started doing yoga. I used to hate yoga, but it's good to wake up to.
Somehow the visual of you doing yoga is not sitting well with me. I just can't.
Yeah, my downward dog's terrible.
I just hearing that and seeing that visual, my PTSD has come back.
Right. I mean, I'm lucky, brother. I got online classes that are killing me. And what's a coincidence, and there's no coincidence, I guess, that my philosophy and ethics class, the papers are absolutely amazing. We're living in a moment of philosophy and ethics right now. It's just amazing. But you really got to keep occupied. You got to do things. You can't just sit around Netflix all day. You have to keep occupied. Otherwise, you're going to go right back to the same drunk, alcoholic, addict that you were before. Same character defects, otherwise, because it ain't going to work.
A lot of the therapists I talk to, their programs are filling up with relapsed people, more so than new clients coming in. They're working on relapse.
Yeah.
Now, you and I have worked together in education. You know very well my education programs that it's ready to launch across New York State. You've flown down from Rochester down to Long Island to be with me and spent a few days actually teaching students about PTSD and about post-trauma, and you seem to take it and just run with it because they loved you, and you were absolutely a hit down here on Long Island. How important do you see the future of the PTSD education, as I've been working on it, and how important do you think that's going to be moving forward?
Oh, and paramount, absolutely paramount. Not just from our PTSD from the past, now the new PTSD, and the PTSD is going to affect the civilians and everybody with this entire thing. I think it's absolutely important. And once we get squared away here, I'm on that, definitely. And I've got a couple guys that are interested too here. I think you have to fix yourself first and then move on and start fixing more people, because then you get it back. You know, that's a good feeling.
We just lost Doc. Doc, thank you so much. Be well, be safe. Say hello to the guys in the shelter and the home. Please be careful out there, and thank you for your service, both for our country in the military in Iraq, and thank you for your service now. You're a true American, and we appreciate your help. So please be safe and be healthy. Thank you. The beginning, hashtag alone together is what the new norm is, and it's nice to know that people are out there in the trenches. You know, we're the soldier in the firefight. We're out there breaking new ground sometimes, and working and doing the job that's done. Like the rest of the unsung heroes in America. You know, I thought about the truck drivers that were constantly. You know, they didn't skip a heartbeat. They brought in groceries, needed supplies. They kept America going. It wasn't the airlines. I'm sure freight cars and freight trains had something going on, but it was the truckers of America that are keeping their finger on the pulse of this country and keeping us going. So to me, those are unsung heroes that we'll never know their names and never know their companies and never know anything about them. But you know, these are the heroes, the people who, you know, we don't hear much about waste management. You know, where does all the medical waste go to? Who handles it? Who cleans up? Who carts it away? Who takes care of disposing of it in a safe manner? People like that you know, you wouldn't give two thoughts about, you know, that are working while we're sleeping. And of course the people on the front lines, you know, the nurses and doctors, but they're getting recognition. But there are so many more people that are working out there that, you know, we take for granted, that we don't think about. And these are the true American heroes. The people, I've always thought about, you know, what is war? I mean, you know, if you had to put it in a nutshell, and I believe, you know, it's taking ordinary people and putting them in extraordinary situations and asking them to do something that, you know, that is beyond their capabilities as an individual, but together they can get the job done. And that's the true meaning to me of an army and a country at war. So I appreciate everyone listening to me. I hope this has been informative and helps the average person to get a handle on certain things. I will post my personal information at the end of this podcast. All of my interview people will take questions, Doc and myself. We will answer all emails, text messages, and you can contact me, and I will put together an answer, whether it be another video cast answering all the personal questions, or I will post them and I will answer everyone back. We'll entertain any questions you have, any concerns, or even comments if you'd like to, you know, yell a little bit of support for what we're trying to do here at Walk with Frank. So we appreciate you listening, and we look forward to all of your comments, questions, and we will answer them. So thank you for tuning in, and I appreciate everyone participating. Peace out. Walk with Frank.